Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. We are bellied up to the bar. We are hitting the two taboos here at the Above the Bar podcast. Things that they say in a bar or at Thanksgiving you don't talk about. We're going to cover both of them. We're going to be talking politics. We're going to be talking religion. And we're going to be talking about how we can do this without murdering each other in that conversation. And the master of ceremonies for this, the guy, I guess in this case, the guy you don't bring to Thanksgiving or to the bar with you because he's going to talk about these kind of things. We from parts unknown, from the far flung areas, and he's got good hair. I couldn't have his hair. I could never pull that one off. From the Talking Politics and Religion podcast, we have with us Mr. CoreyNathan. Wrong button. Look at that. You were supposed to get I got a new soundboard. I so suck with this thing. Hold on. Stand by. Why is my soundboard messing with me? Here.
Oh, wow.
Much better.
Thank you. Sean, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for having me at the bar.
Absolutely. And we appreciate having you. And I meant to ask you this earlier because we were talking before the show that he was doing some local stuff with his own political constituents. What area of the country are you coming to us from today?
I live about 30 miles north of Los Angeles. So it's a town called Santa Clarita. If you've ever seen, there's a show on Netflix with, what's her name? She was the little girl in E.T. and now she has a talk show.
Drew Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore, yeah. So she was the star of the show, sitcom about, plays a real estate agent, but she's
the zombie one.
Yes, she's a man-eating zombie. And I'm like, this is so accurate to my town. Like it depicts the characters of my town so like spot on,
That's too funny. Yeah, because I know the show you're talking about. I'll have to introduce you to since you're into the whole politics out there, I'll have to introduce you to Kristen Manna. She's been on the show. She's a good friend of the show. Kristen is very involved with the GOP out there, but not in front of the camera, but behind it.
Okay.
And I just also talking about Los Angeles. I just looked up because my kids live in Florida. Two of them, my sons that are in college and in 26 years old. And we were like, they went through the hurricane. Do you know the safest and most dangerous natural disaster cities in America?
So, I mean, I'm going to guess like Miami and Los Angeles for like hurricane and earthquake reasons, but am I wrong?
Los Angeles is number one for natural disasters in the country. It is the least safest place in the country to live for natural disasters. But do you know what the safest one is?
Is it Miami?
No, Syracuse, New York.
Oh, man. But then you have to live in Syracuse.
Syracuse isn't that bad. I've been there plenty of times. If you've never been to Syracuse, you got to become an Orangeman fan. They do have a horrible – kids don't graduate from college there often. It's like really bad. That's like one of their big claims to fame is you go and you play sports there, but nobody ever graduates. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting. So
that is interesting.
We're bellied up and already making left turns here and stuff. Oh, look at that. Look who just popped up. Kristen Manna.
Oh, hey, Kristen Manna.
I wanted you to know that our guest today, Corey, is right there in Santa Clarita and in your backyard, and he does politics.
Yeah.
On his podcast, so you'll have to link up. You guys will have to talk. Well, I'll introduce you to. But
I'm friendly with some of the GOPers out here. Scott Wilk and I are good pals. He's our state senator. I haven't really gotten to know Suzette yet, but she's terrific. She's our state assembly member now. And a bunch of the people, they're not supposed to declare for city council, but a bunch of like Mayor Bill. Well, he was mayor pro tem, but Bill Miranda and I are good pals. So yeah.
you're all up in the mix. See, I don't.
Yeah.
We had gosh, and now my brain's Jones ran for governor out there. Gosh, why's my brain not working right now? Oh, look at this. I want to meet Corey. I'm so happy that he's your guest on the show. Yay, I can't wait. Look at that.
I'd love to. I'm sure there's some things that I'm going to piss you off and you're going to reverse your decision. Like now I definitely don't want to talk to that guy, but I'd love to. It'd be great to like have a coffee or whatever, a beer or something. So
though, she's the one that if you have managed to piss off Kristen, you have done something. Like you have succeeded where few have succeeded if you pull that one off. But
well, let me see. Let me give it a whirl.
But let's get into some things here before we get this show starting. As always, folks, if you're joining us for the first time, you're checking us out, please like, share, subscribe, do all those kind of things. That if this is your first time checking us out, if you found us through Corey, if you're finding Corey through us, make sure you go check him out. His ticker's running along the bottom right now. Politicsandreligion.us is his website. And I'm switching over here. And if you're looking to actually connect with him, he says he uses Twitter more than anything, and that's at Corey S. Nathan. That's at Corey S. Nathan. If you're looking for him on Twitter, it's also his Instagram. He says doesn't use it much, but we'll stalk him there if we need to. So, but at the same time, let's get into some things as we always do. If you've got something, maybe you've got a podcast, you've got a political group, whatever it is you're into, whatever you're supporting, if you reach out to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, even our email, it's all the Above the Bar podcast, and the email is at gmail.com. Send us a message. I'll read it. I'll give you the address where to send the stuff at. You send me a sticker. I put it on the big board behind me. The goal here is to fill that thing up once it's on the big board, and we'll read about whatever group you've got going. But now maybe your media is part of the Bull Party. And if you know what the Bull Party was, it's old and really didn't do much for what it thought it was going to be. So keep that in mind. And
is the Bull Moose Party or the Bull Party?
The Bull Party. That was Teddy Roosevelt.
Well, Bull Moose, yeah, Bull Moose. Teddy ran in 1912. Yeah, he ran on the Bull Moose Party because his old pal, who was a one-term president, 1908 to 1909 to 1913. Taft, was that his name? Teddy wasn't too happy with him, and then he couldn't get the Republican vote, so he split off and did the Bull Moose Party. But I think he would appeal to a lot of people. That like his ethos would appeal to a lot of people because he was conservative in some realms, but libertarian in others and progressive in others. You know, he wasn't like orthodox to one particular. Sorry, I can't do I'm not a multitasker, so I'm reading Kristen's comment. And anyway,
already trying to hook you up with other podcasts. How about he stays on this one for right now, Kristen? Let's just wait for right now. We'll throw him off to other people soon enough. Just let's go with this one for a moment. But yeah, so if your media is still sitting back in 1912 and you want to update it, make sure you reach out to Media by Dibs. That's DIBS. You can catch Dibs on Instagram and on Facebook at Media by Dibs. And if you look him up on LinkedIn, it's Andrew Dibble, Dibble. Reach out to Media by Dibs. All right. Homework or house.
Wait, is that in relation to Rob Dibble?
I don't know. He's from out this way.
Oh, okay.
In Michigan. He's many times he's my co-host. You're all good there, Kristen. A lot of times he's my co-host. He wasn't able to make it today. But all that being said, we are talking, and I said at the beginning, we're talking about two things that you're not supposed to talk about at the bar. Corey's got a podcast. It's about politics, and it's about religion, and it's about how to have these conversations without killing each other.
That's right.
In the process of doing it. So, brother, again, welcome to the bar.
Thanks. What are we drinking? So I'm kind of a rye guy, but what are we drinking?
Now, I told you, folks, for those of you that know, I blew out my ACL a few months back. I'm finally getting surgery tomorrow. So I love out here in our area. One of the few things that Lord Commander Cuomo ever got right was he made it to where you could get a distiller's license in New York for $1,000.
Oh, wow.
And the key to it is whatever you produced had to be 75% of that product had to be New York material. Well,
Okay.
rye is a New York grain.
Oh, nice.
And good friends of the show, buddies of mine that have been on a couple of times, New Scotland Spirits make the best rye I've ever had. Helderberg, they're up in the Helderberg Mountains. It's amazing rye. The best way I can describe it to you, Corey, is when you smell it, it smells like a new baseball glove. That leathery smell. It is
I love it.
It is so perfect. That, and I'm a big bourbon drinker. Their bourbon is amazing, but my favorite is Heaven's Hill.
Oh, I'm gonna have to give that a whirl.
Yeah, that's they're one of the ones. I don't know if you knew this. There's only you know how they talk.
I mean,
about,
it's appropriate for our conversation. A little bit of heaven, right?
A little bit of heaven. Well, you know how people talk about the Illuminati and all those kind of crazy theories that are out there. Heaven's Hill and Seagram's, and there's a couple of other ones out there. There's only like truly 5 or 7 just liquor companies that own all the rest. All the, unless it's like something in your next door neighbor, in your very local neighborhood.
Yeah.
All the rest of them that are out there.
Yeah.
Like Buffalo Trace is owned by Heaven's Hill.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like you start looking.
That's my go-to, by the way. Buffalo Trace. I mean, I know I said rye, but like Buffalo Trace is definitely a trusty bourbon. So
you can't go wrong. It's one of those. And if you like bourbon, you got to watch the documentary Neat, N-E-A-T.
Yeah, I did.
It's amazing.
Yeah, really cool. Really interesting stuff.
And I love how they I mean, of all industries in America, to me, bourbon has done the best of manufacturing a product shortage that isn't there. Because if you look at it, they're like, oh, well, this bourbon right here, it's only came out of this one barrel and we put a number on it.
That's right.
Well, it must be amazing. Then I need to have that.
That's right. It's like these pictures in the back, they make a high quality G clay or whatever. They call it something fancy. It's basically a copy of a painting, but they put numbers on it, like 12 out of 82. And now all of a sudden, instead of paying like, $50 for it, I'm paying like $3,000 for it.
We were just at New York City Comic-Con, my best friend Ken and I bought my wife. I don't know if you know who Alex Ross is. I bought her an.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I bought her an Alex Ross print. He does the best out there for comic book artists that are around. Bought her an Alex Ross print. It was numbered. It's a poster. It's the equivalent of but that's how Picasso made his money.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If you look a lot, we think about the original Picassos, but he sold prints also.
Okay.
So you can find original Picasso prints, because I always thought about him when I was younger. I didn't realize he lived in the 1900s.
Yeah. Yeah. He lived at least into the 50s, right? 1950s. I forget when he died, but yeah, he was creating art. I mean, he came into his own right around the time of George Braque, like the post Monet, those guys. And they were exploring this whole other cubist thing, with shapes and the way they describe it is him and Braque were coming into their own when jazz was first coming on the scene, and what they were experimenting with was trying to see a figure from all sides at the same time. And Picasso's idea of it was like to be able to see things the way God sees things, from every angle, all at the same time. You know what I mean? So,
and there is actually the gentleman who, if you guys are around on this Saturday, we're doing a live
73. Yeah.
We're doing a live show on Saturday. James reached out to me and asked if I would come out and moderate a political thing that they've got going on here in New York in the Ravina Koyman area. He's probably going to correct me. I'm pretty sure I have to look it up. I'm going to be in another bar. That's all that matters to me.
Okay.
Like 2 days after my surgery. So it'll be a good time. Antibiotics and liquor. It'll be fine. Nobody said
anything.
Thing.
Little Vicodin, a little liquor.
Yep. Yeah, it's good for you. Put hair on your chest.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was right. Ravina Koyman. So, but let's get into this. So you do a show,
Yeah.
and it truly the long form name of it is talking politics and religion and how not to kill each other. It's like that's like the long form name. I'm probably missing a piece of it there, but that's
That's
about
all right. Yeah, you got it about right. Talking politics and religion without killing each other.
there. You go. What and I'm kind of curious to this. Were you all getting into this? And we talked a little bit about you have a pastor, I have a pastor. People get surprised, like you go to church, yeah, every Sunday.
Yeah.
I do that. But what got you? Were you always into this stuff? Was there something that happened? Like, what birthed your podcast?
In some ways, it was birthed about 20 something years ago when so I grew up in a very observantly Jewish family. We went to an Orthodox synagogue. I went to Hebrew school my whole life, even into high school. But I became a Christian when I was 29.
Oh, wow.
So that forced a couple things to happen. One is I had to have very difficult conversations with my family about why I became a Christian.
Whole family's Jewish, mom and dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My father's become even more observant. He wears a yarmulke. He davens 3 times a day with minyan. Like we weren't once a year Jews that just like showed up for Yom Kippur and pounded our chest a little bit. We were like keeping kosher, and I know what Tishba of is. I mean, like so yeah, we were serious, but there was this thing that happened in 2000. You were remarking on my books. That was one of those seasons when I was reading probably 10 hours a day, like without exaggeration. I just had these existential questions that I was pursuing. And without going too deep into the details, I finally got to the point where I was like, I need to read the New Testament. Because I come from not just a Jewish family, but like a part of my family came from Eastern Europe. Another part of my family was eviscerated in World War in the Holocaust.
Oh, wow.
So we had an aversion to people wearing crosses. We had an aversion to Christianity because it was the guys wearing crosses on their shields and on their helmets that were swinging their swords and beheading our neighbors and burning down our houses and raping our family members. So we had an aversion to Christianity. But I couldn't even get to the point to read the New Testament until I had months and months of spring and summer where I was looking into theological, existential, philosophical questions. I finally read the New Testament, and the first book was actually the book of James, where it's like written for the Jews. It's like to the 12 tribes. I'm like, oh, hey, how you doing? That's me, and it was actually dealing with that book, that letter's dealing with stuff that I was grappling with, like faith versus works. I'm not quite getting this thing. And then I just started at the beginning of the collection in Matthew. And what I encountered Jesus as, like his interactions with the Pharisees, it struck me as how rabbis would talk to each other. Like if you read the Talmud is basically a number of scholars and rabbis, studying the Torah and having these heated debates about what it means. And that's what Jesus's confrontations, like in Matthew 23, when it's really, really heated. But it just struck me as rabbis talking amongst each other and having differences. But then also, like early in the book, early in that first letter, or excuse me, the gospel, Matthew 5, he gets into what I recognized as in Judaism, it's called a Devar Torah. Jesus was giving a Devar Torah, and frankly, it was one of the most brilliant Devar Torahs I'd ever read.
Now, what does that mean? I've never heard that term.
So Devar Torah, traditionally in Judaism, I know in Orthodox Judaism, I don't know how it is in conservative or Reform Judaism, but in Orthodox, you read portions of the Torah 3 times a week. And typically what happens is you read the portion, and then the rabbi gives he teaches about that portion. It's called Devar Torah. So Jesus was given this Devar Torah, and it was Jesus himself and what he was teaching that compelled me the most. And so anyway, I got to the end of the book. I had some Christian friends that I was talking to, and I prayed a clumsy prayer one night in October of 2000. And I woke up the next day and I told my wife, hey, Lee, I think I'm a Christian, But then having to have those conversations, we went back for Thanksgiving. My parents were living in Jersey at the time. They're in upstate New York now. They're actually not upstate. They're in what would you call it? Warwick, New York, in the Hudson Valley.
Okay. So
they were in Jersey at the time.
They're south. I'm in Albany, so.
Oh, okay, yeah. So not too far from you. We have cousins there, and had to have some really difficult conversations with them. But here's the other thing. This is where the politics comes in. I started going to church. First thing you do, you become a Christian, you start going to church. I started going to church, and I realized that a lot of people I was going to church with weren't nearly as enamored or compelled by Scripture and the virtues espoused in Scripture as they were with these other social and political things. And sometimes those social and political issues, frankly, were at odds. Even back then with what we read in Scripture. There was one early on where it was actually something in Torah in Leviticus where I got into a conflict about immigration. And the guy was trying to come to this really hardcore anti-immigration policy based on a couple of things he was drawing from Leviticus 19 at the top. I'm like, dude, have you read the chapter? Like, let's keep reading the chapter. I don't think you're reading it very well, because by the bottom of the chapter, it's basically, I wouldn't say it's an open border policy, but God is saying, listen, you have to treat, it's another version of treat your neighbors as yourselves, treat the immigrants among you as one of your own. And then he gives a whole bunch of different processes to go through in order to make them part of the tribes. But he also says, because I'm your God, you are my people and I'm your God. So I got into a heated argument about, like, hey man, if you're anti-immigrant, like, you're entitled, like, it's a free country, you're entitled to that, but let's not pretend that it's based on Scripture. Like, if you believe in Scripture and prioritize Scripture, great, let's talk about Scripture. I happen to believe it's authoritative. So I was coming across like the Jersey Jew that I am. So, I got kicked out of that Bible study, but I'm like, it's the Bible. Like,
Listen, I'm going to need to tell you about this. Listen to here. Hey, you don't get it. You don't understand what I'm trying to explain to you.
Yeah.
Let's sit down. We'll have a little bit of sandwich, put a little bit of sugar on there, but it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. I understand exactly what, and it's interesting. You definitely, knowing the background with a Jewish upbringing and then into Christianity, you definitely have a different approach to it and a different understanding. And I can't tell you how many times I've explained to people, I'm like, do you know the first Christians, it was Judeo-Christian? And they're like, well, I don't even understand what that means. I'm like, oh, do you know the Dead Sea Scrolls, those pieces of paper that were stuck in a jar? Yeah, that Judeo, meaning Jewish Christians converted. And even when you're talking about the way Jesus spoke, many times the correct translation of what they called him was not teacher, they called him rabbi.
Rabbi.
They called him rabbi because that was their understanding. So it's a very interesting approach. And I have to tell you, I'm a little jealous of that level of knowledge, because I've always approached my faith. I went from growing up Roman Catholic to becoming a Methodist. And I've told the story before. God meant for me to be a Methodist. Like, all my children were baptized Methodist. And when when one of my sons was born, he was born on a Friday. That Sunday we walked into our current church, and he's 13, and I've never gone to another one since then. And it was a Methodist. I've always said God meant me to be a Methodist. But so it's interesting that you've got that approach and you've brought that light. Have you caught heat even before the podcast? I know you said you got into it with somebody about that, but when you're able to bring that level of knowledge to be able to say, hey, look, this is what it's because the Old Testament is the Old Testament. If you didn't know that, folks, a little education. All three of your major religions use the same thing as the Old Testament. The separation isn't until you get to Catholicism or Christianity goes into a New Testament, then Islam has their versions, and then the Jewish faith kind of goes, nope, none of that shit ever happened. Stop right here. Stop right here, folks. You guys don't even know.
Yeah. I have caught heat, but that's basically what my project has been. I spent the last 22 years, I guess, figuring out how to talk to people more effectively about these important issues. We don't talk about it because we've lost the ability to talk about it. But these things are important, man. Like I know that not everybody's like me, that they lose sleep at night wondering about these big existential questions. But but I do. Like I think about, where did this all come from? And and listen, I'm not like a young Earth creationist, so I also really appreciate macro physics and all that stuff. But it's also the philosophical questions of like the why behind it, and then also crafting a meaningful story about who we are as a people and in how we live well among each other as a people. And that's where religion and politics all are supposed to come in. But what I noticed is, and listen, I've been in certain conversations where folks want to ask me about specific issues, specific policies. And there's certain ones that I do feel pretty strongly about, but no policy do I feel as strongly about as a conviction that we have turned people who disagree with us into enemies that we can't even talk to, and I just think, listen, I'm not a big Hannity fan, for example, but I got a buddy, Piarino. He's originally from Italy, but he's got Hannity on all the time. He's got Tucker on all the time. He's a big fan. But you know what, Pete and I, when we see each other, his dog Bella, we get along really well. I've been over his house with Hannity blaring in the background. He's a great cook. His wife makes his wife is a great baker, and we get along. We still got to figure out how to, like, hey, you like that thing, I like the other thing. I see you got a Ravens sticker. I'm a Giants fan. We still got to figure out how to get along, even though you're wrong about the football thing.
Whoa. Do we want to talk about a Super Bowl win? You hear that was over?
07, 2011. Yeah, I know. You had the one where we had
the night
Collins.
The night the lights went out.
Yeah.
Which I swore that was the fix was in there. And Kristen asked it. So, and we're going to get into more about his podcast, but when do you air your episodes? Do you do any live recordings? And what's an example of some of the guests that you've had on?
Yeah. So thanks for asking. I don't do live recordings, but I am absolutely, I love the interplay and I'm open to doing that. Frankly, I have to learn about it. And, this platform is great. Maybe we'll do something like this and start integrating some live shows. We typically release an episode on Sunday night. Sometimes I'm getting late, so it doesn't get released till Monday morning. The one that's airing this week, I had, if you're political geeks, political junkies like me, you'll know who these guys are. I had Mike Madrid and Joe Trippi on together. And Madrid is a longtime Republican strategist, practitioner. And one of his biggest claims to fame is he got Arnold elected governor, a Republican elected in California. Trippi, his claim to fame, well, he's been in presidential elections, but he was, what's his name, the governor from Vermont, 04 grassroots campaign. He was on his Howard Dean's campaign, but more recently he got Jones. Yeah, exactly. He got Jones elected in Alabama. So I had the Democrat who got a Democrat elected statewide in Alabama and the Republican who got a Republican elected statewide in California. And they were just talking about the state of politics, the state of the election, what's going on in the campaign. What was interesting is that they both agreed that democracy is on the ballot, that it's not hyperbolic to say that democracy itself is on the ballot.
I agree.
So Mike, despite his conservative political leanings and long track record, he's been doing this since the late 80s. He really feels that, when you have candidates like the governor of Arizona, that race, somebody like Kari Lake, who brazenly still says that the 2020 election was stolen. He says that's a danger. Like I can't get to fiscal policy. I can't get to foreign policy. If we don't have a free and fair election, a democracy, we can't even talk about that stuff. So it was a really interesting conversation. I've had people like, when I left New Jersey in 1995, my favorite governor, Christie Whitman. So we had Governor Christine Todd Whitman on. We've had also Jersey. So every once in a while, I'll take a random guest on. But so we had John Popper. I don't know if you know Blues Traveler.
Absolutely. How many times arrested for gun charges? And
talk about libertarian, dude. That's why we had him on, because dude, it's hardcore libertarian.
Absolutely.
I think he has like liberal social positions, like on abortion, for example. but he's hardcore libertarian when it comes to gun rights. Interesting dude.
Arrested, but he was going through a spurt there where like every time they pulled him over, he had like a new like hiding spot for a gun in his car. And all kinds of stuff. That's a great one. I would love to talk to a guy like that. That we'll have to, you and I will have to talk to figure out where you get all your guests from, because that's one that I would definitely be interested in.
So you know what's crazy? Doing this thing, I don't come from politics. I don't come from journalism. And when I started reaching out to people that I really love, like politicians that I really admire and respect, journalists, writers that I really admire and respect. We had Pete Wehner, we had Jonathan Rauch. What amazed me is that a nobody like me can reach out to these people and they get back to me. They're like, yeah, hey, that sounds like fun. Let's, I reach out to them. Hey, I really respect your work. And we're doing this thing called Talk Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. We'd love to have you on. We'll talk about your new book or whatever. And they get back to me like, hey, that sounds like fun. I'm like, really?
Isn't it wild? Now, what do you think about, now I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
All right.
Bart Barber.
Wait. The head of the SBC?
Yeah, Southern Baptist Conference was just on
60 Minutes.
60 Minutes the other day, and CBS Sunday Morning ran it also.
Yeah.
He's a unique guy. So he's, leading 75 million people.
Yep.
For the Southern Baptist Conference. For those who don't know it, it's the largest Baptist conference in the country. Heads up 75 million people. Straight up said that January 6th was BS and that the election wasn't rigged. It is what it is. Stop playing games with it.
Says he prays for President Biden every day. He's the duly elected president. He's our president.
All that stuff.
But you know what else is interesting and I really respected is when Cooper Anderson, when Anderson Cooper got to some theological questions,
yes,
he's very, very conservative theologically. And I appreciated the fact that he was just being candid, So while on the one hand, he has these political positions that I'm sure he's getting a lot of heat for saying that 2020 was fair, a lot of heat for it. And yet the dude is still, he's not in favor of gay marriage. He is life of conception, all these. And so he didn't try to give answers and tailor it for what he thought the audience was. He was just being 100% candid. And I really, even though I disagree with some of his positions theologically, I respect a guy who stands on his convictions regardless of what the ramifications will be,
I have to agree with you there. And this kind of gets into one of my biggest things when it gets into politics and religion. And correct, you can correct me, Corey. You sound way smarter than I am on a lot of these things, but when people talk about the Roe v. Wade stuff that's going on, and first off, I always have to educate people. It's not illegal. Abortion is not illegal. They push it to a states' right thing.
Right.
It's not illegal. But also when you start educating people who are hardcore pro-life or not pro-life, but anti-abortion, and you have to educate them that, hey, you do know that this never was a topic in this entire country till the early 1900s when every religion was trying to decide who was the most conservative so that they could be the one in charge. This was not a topic. This is not something that ever came up. This is something that became political in the early 1900s because you want to see how conservative I am? This is what I believe. Well, you think you're conservative? Watch what I do.
Yeah.
Also around, you get prohibition during those time frames and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So how do you feel about that?
So believe it or not, it's even more recent than that. Cooper showed what the SBC's actual position on abortion was circa 1971, which happens to be the year that I was born. And it's interesting because it sounds, it couldn't have reflected a life starts at conception ethos or position because it was very sympathetic to women needing abortions if their health was in danger, if the baby's life was in danger. They spelled out very specific situations when abortion would be necessary, and it wasn't even like life of the mother at stake. It was even like I forgot the way it was worded, but it was worded in such a way where if it was just very sympathetic.
Right.
And that was 71. But post Roe, so I think that was 73, there were these other political entities that found they could basically hijack certain cultural issues and then really create divisions, so that they can really parlay it, and get legislation passed, work it into campaigns to get certain politicians elected, and it was basically a caboose that they hitched onto a segregationist wagon. So abortion was one of 2 or 3 issues that they hooked onto that wagon. I don't know the timeline of it quite as well as I should, but I've been learning more about it. I'm reading Stuart Stevens' book right now, and he's about 65, 70 years old. So he was on campaigns in the late 70s, early 80s when he was starting his career, and he did it. He was basically, his book, the first part of his book, he's sharing the story about they couldn't be explicitly race oriented, but they could have these issues that was explicitly playing towards white grievance. So they, by the time he got involved in the politics, he couldn't do the segregation thing, but he knew that in the South, this is a Southern Nixon Southern strategy. He knew that there were code words and code issues, if you will, that played directly to white grievance. So it's such an interesting history to see how it's all evolved, and then to start to connect the dots and look at issues that smart strategists and regardless of whether you agree with them or not, they're just strategic at what they do. Leave the conscience part of it or the ethical part of it aside. It's like, wow, that's really interesting what they're doing. They're playing up CRT or something like that, or reacting a certain way to Black Lives Matter, and it's like, huh. I see who they're playing to, and it's working.
100%. Well, that's the whole statue thing. These people that get so upset when a statue gets pulled down or all that, and I'm like, you do realize they were mostly put up as a race, kind of like, oh no, we're just Southern pride. No, you just put up a statue of an obvious Confederate loser general who owned slaves just to piss people off. And you screened it in this Southern pride thing, which always has made me laugh. I'm always like, that's not how that works. So when people said about these statues, it's always like, look, folks, that statue wasn't there when your grandparents were born. Somebody put that thing up just to be a dick, just to be a dick. That's all it was. It was a dickhead move, and that's why they put it up. So let's just understand that that's what that is. But that brings me to my next question.
Sure.
Which is, when you're addressing these things with people and you're talking to them, do you ever get into, or what is your thoughts on and this is what I think about where religion gets into politics. Where does your morality, your religious morality stop and my morality can begin? And what I mean by that is, when you look at most things, and we're talking about, we mentioned Roe v. Wade, or you look at even our drug laws in this country, which are very race related. Most of these things are of a moral nature. You have decided based on your religious belief that this is the correct morality to something, and it has no value in politics, which should be down the middle, that pulled away from it. What is the actual just legality taking? Is that making sense to you?
I think I understand what you're getting at. Like, to what degree is it cool to impose my beliefs on you?
Thank you. Yes.
And I don't think it's cool at all, because I think one of the great confusions I've learned about American evangelicalism in particular is that a lot of the real priorities look a lot more. It's so funny, Kristen.
Kristen says Roe v. Wade needs a lot of drinks. I always tell my candidates to say both the baby and the mama's lives matter.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think where we've gotten confused, and I still consider myself an evangelical, is that a lot of what's actually important to us looks a lot more like a colonial, like a colonizer, than the community, the people of God that around that is defined with Jesus at the center, right? We are the first fruits of the resurrection. We're the coming attraction of what it should look like when we complete the work of the Hebrew expression is tikkun olam, of healing the world, right? But I think, and this has been happening for at least 1700 years, plus or minus. You know, when Constantine became a Christian, that's when Christianity was born. Really,
Thank you.
that's when. So it became a part of empire, and
Thank you.
It's repeated itself throughout history, where we're using the language of God, and in some way, in a lot of ways, it's happening today, where we're using these symbols and these words, and we're borrowing it for this other agenda, right? But that's not what the Bible's all about. That's not what it's outside of what our actual work is. Our work here on earth is tikkun olam, is to be the people of God, is to it's not to pass a certain law. It's not to impose our particular set of beliefs on everybody around us. So for me personally, I appreciate the fact that we live in a pluralistic society. I've come to certain conclusions about where my morality comes from and how I'm going to come to certain decisions. And it's based on the absolute conviction above everything else. Like, listen, we could talk about theology, my particular theology, but above everything else, what I am absolutely convinced about is, if there is a God, I ain't him. Like, I am not God. Because if you knew how much of an asshole I am, you would know that I'm not God either. So
that's the Jersey upbringing right there.
Yeah.
That is.
So me being an imperfect vessel, who am I to impose my imperfections on everybody else? And because I'm an imperfect vessel, that's why I get to certain conclusions, right? But at the end of the day, I'm still not God. So I have to defer to what I've come to believe is authoritative morally and ethically, but those are my conclusions and my conversation with God. If I'm trying to impose my will on somebody else, then all of a sudden I'm trying to make myself God. And if I really believe in God, I have to believe that God is working on that individual in their own way. And maybe God can speak a multitude of languages, theological languages. So that's a possibility too. But each individual has to walk their own walk, So yeah, I think that that's why I came to the conclusion, even though I have certain convictions based on the Bible, like back in 2004, I was still a baby Christian. They were trying to pass Prop 8 to legalize gay marriage. A lot of my friends from church felt very strongly that, oh no, it shouldn't be legal. I'm like, so hold on, guys. So here's the thing. Let's say this Prop 8 gets passed and it's illegal. I got a lot of friends who happen to be gay. They're not going to wake up the next day and be like, well, it's illegal. Being gay must be wrong. I better become a Christian. Like,
you said you were a Giants fan.
What?
You said you were a Giants fan.
Why? Because I'm talking about gay people? Like, what?
Yeah, that's what I figured you meant there. When you said I had a lot of friends who are gay, I figured you're a Giants fan. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, being a Giants fan, being a Ravens fan, like, listen, you have the right to be wrong about that.
but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely. Oh, you guys. Oh, you said it's illegal. Like, it
must be wrong.
Must be wrong.
I better not be gay.
Right. That's why I'll be honest. It's why one of the things I love about being a Methodist. We're about to have a big split in the United Methodist faith. That's a big thing that's coming down, where a large portion of us are very supportive of the LGBTQ community. We're very supportive. We have children that are a part of that community, and we support them. And unless I misread my Bible, it never says anything about gay being wrong. There's a political portion in that where it talks about the Romans, and that was about.
I've learned something over the last year, because I studied with some people who know the original languages, the Aramaic, and then the early translations, the the Latin and the Greek, the earliest translations. And this is really timely, actually. A lot of the places where a number of English translations say homosexual or homosexual acts, or versions of that, the word is actually sexual immorality, and it's referring to something very specific where leaders, people in positions of authority, would use their position to basically rape people, to rape little boys, and So when the head of the SBC in that interview said, "This is a real problem," I was really encouraged.
He said, "Bro, that blew my mind."
Yeah. So the parts where we've been taking excerpts from, say, First Timothy or Titus and saying, "Oh, well, this is where it says it's sinful." No. What it's actually talking about is what's happening in the churches. Is sexual abuse in the churches looks a lot more like what Timothy was talking, what's talked about in Timothy and Romans and First Corinthians. That's what it's talking about, not homosexuality. So it's been a huge eye opener for me.
Love that, brother. Like, you get another. I've got to switch channels again, but you get another. I have tried to explain to people for so long just the simple things of, like, they're like, this is what it says. I'm like, no. Thou shalt not kill is not what the Bible says. It says thou shalt not murder. And you got to go back to, again, Aramaic, and understand that we transferred from a dead language to another dead language. And then what does it? It's Aramaic to Latin, or Aramaic to Greek. I think it's Aramaic to Greek, then to Latin. And then
you might know better than I do. I'm still learning this stuff.
And it's just like when you brought up Constantine. That's my other favorite one. Is when you get the real hardcore, and you're like, you do know that a Roman emperor is why you have the Bible you have today. And they're like,
yeah,
what are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, like, before him, there was a half of Christianity that believed in the Holy Trinity. And then the other half of Christianity thought it was three separate people, three separate entities that.
Yeah, they were working stuff out. That's what the Nicene Council was all about.
And when you explain that to people, I had an ex-brother-in-law who went to one of those mega churches in PA. Nice guy, super nice guy. Found God, cleaned his act up. It was very important to him. And then I explained that to him, and I felt like a bad person. I felt like a bad person telling him this when he was like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's how it all got put together." He's like, "What? No, I mean," I'm like, "Yeah, bro. Like, do you know why that there's a portion of Paul that got removed when he talked about, like, you don't need to go to church anymore? You could just do that stuff on your own." They removed that because that was not how you could control people and their finances and all that. And he was like, I felt like a bad person. Like, I had done some bad shit at that point. and that's funny. And it's interesting to me to hear your, like, Corey, like, I love your viewpoint. And folks, again, make sure you're checking out Corey's website, www.politicsandreligion.us. And then if you're looking him up on social media, it's at Corey S. Nathan. On Twitter is where he spends most of his time. And you can find him, and you can listen to his show. Comes out on Sunday nights or Mondays is when he releases an episode. Depends upon what he's got going on. He's got good hair, so he might have to, like, do his hair that day. Might be shampooing it all up, or cry. I can't say he's crying over the Giants because they're having a hell of a season right now.
4-1 so far, and I think we play next Sunday, right?
Is it? Yeah, actually, I think
we play on Sunday. Yeah,
I got 5 on it. Let's talk about it. I got 5 on it. Let's talk about it. But so now for you in this arena or on your show, and
yeah,
we talk about this on our show. Everyone is welcome. Nothing's off limits, and there only gets to be the one asshole, and that's me. On your show, is there anything in that political or religious arena where you just go, nope, we're not touching this? It is too much of a polarizing type thing, or it's just something that is too emotional for most people to even deal with?
So it's an interesting way to ask that question. It'd be like how they defined porn. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it, right? Um, but what I will say, so if you present me with a person or a topic, I don't know. I haven't been presented with one yet that I said, nah, we just can't talk about that. What I will say is I know how wide of a swath of views are represented by the guests that we've had on and the people who are listening. So the guests that I've had on go from long-term, classical conservatives like Buckley, William F. Buckley type conservatives and Thomas Sowell type conservatives, all the way to pretty liberal. People who are like big AOC fans, for example. Who I haven't had on are people. Yeah,
I can't with her.
yeah. Well, I appreciate being in conversations with folks because sometimes I think it's funny. I had a conversation with somebody not too long ago that is very, very, very progressive, and what I realized is the person is suffering from we're getting these comments live. That's why I'm like getting distracted.
Jim.
It's like a collective narcissism. It's like, how can you not believe this? How can you not feel so passionately about this? And how can they can't imagine somebody having a different opinion than they do. It's like maybe I'm being too harsh, but I can still have those conversations. Like because I love hearing and talking to people that disagree with me. The one set of beliefs that haven't been represented is folks who are still on the Stop the Steal train. Folks who are still saying, "Oh, January 6th was legitimate political discourse." Like, nah, sorry, that's a bridge too far for me. People freaking died. Like, so that's but so yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I've already said a bunch of Republican politicians here in my area, but like, and this might upset Kristen, but I can't bring myself to vote for Mike Garcia. He was supposed to our district is a very closely held district. He won this district by 333 votes out of over 340,000 people who voted. So that's less than 1/10 of 1%. So it's a really closely divided district. And yet Mike, from the first day of this term, January 6th, he voted to overturn the election of Pennsylvania. January 7th, he voted to overturn the election of Arizona. And his voting record and his public rhetoric since day one has been very, very hardcore MAGA, and I just can't get behind it. Whereas other politicians like Scott Wilk, our state senator, Republican, he has found ways to collaborate by necessity because it's they're very Democratic dominated state Senate, Democratic dominated assembly. But Scott doesn't talk about Democrats as if they're the enemy. He doesn't talk about Democrats as if every time he mentions a Democratic politician, he feels obligated to vilify them. So
I say I want to run for some major political seat, and I wish
The Rock.
No, Larry Hogan.
I love Larry Hogan. I mean, give me a Republican executive like Larry Hogan or Charlie. What's his name from Massachusetts?
See, I was thinking you were talking about what's his name, Murphy from Vermont. I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, Murphy from Vermont. That's another good one.
Yeah, I think. But you know what's so great about those guys that we're mentioning right now? It is those are so Murphy from Vermont to me is the Republican I grew up with as a kid. That he meets that. Hogan is that same way. And these are also all guys that stood there and go, January 6th is bogus. Like this is, you can't do this. We don't do these. But here's one for you. Gabby, oh God, I just had a brain for Hawaii.
She was in the Democratic nomination process. Yeah.
What the heck is her name? Somebody help me out here.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. She just left. Now that's my favorite Dem.
She what?
She just announced she's leaving the Democratic Party.
Oh, that's interesting. So I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think there's going to be a forward party presidential candidate in 24, but I think we're going to have a lot of key forward party in various local and state elections in the 24 cycle.
What do you mean by forward party?
So Christy Whitman, Miles Taylor, what's his name? Andrew Yang. They got together and they kind of combined a bunch of different forces and they started the forward party. And they're recruiting candidates, not left, not right, forward. They recruited a bunch of candidates who can't identify with the two major parties, and they're recruiting a lot of candidates in numerous states for the 24 cycle, mostly at the state and local level. And I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people who are not big third party because they think it's going to take away from whichever side they want to win. But it's like, no, wait a second. Especially at the state and local level, I think we have an opportunity to see it. It's the experiment, at the state level experiments to see if this thing works. So I think that's one of the things that can maybe heal some of the divisiveness, the warlike level of divisiveness that we have now. There's some other things too. I think open primaries, what they did in Alaska, ranked choice voting. So there's some other processes that are going to help. But
I am a big fan of ranked choice voting. It's used in a lot of countries, and it's interesting when you see it. You feel like your voice gets heard, and that third party candidate gets heard. If you start looking, Australia does ranked choice also, and if you start looking at it, you find that the third party candidate is in the commercial with one of the bigger candidates, and they're like, hey, if you like what I say, put me as number one, but you can make them number two. That you start to see that working back and forth. But you bring up a great point, and this is something I have a lot of passion. And anybody knows me, I stand by my fact that I'm a libertarian. I love the fact of what it stands for. Yes, it's got some tin hats out there, but I think they all do. I'm looking at you, QAnon shaman, all the tin hat wearers. But what I'm curious of is you brought up that grassroots, and my best friend Ken and I talk about this all the time. Why do you think that some of these third party candidates can't get it into their mindset that they need to win that school election? They need to win that county executive long before they start having these conversations about mayor, senator, governor, because they get blown out instantaneously. And like you said, if you're a libertarian, you stole votes from the Republican Party. If you're green, you stole votes from the Democratic Party. They didn't steal votes, folks. People just didn't like your candidate. Your candidate's a turd.
Right.
But how do you feel about, how do you even approach that? Maybe that's a better question. How do you approach those people and say, stop running at that level, run at this level?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's on an individual basis. There are some folks who just aren't educated enough about our civics to know where to even begin, to run for like the water board, for example. A friend of mine started with the board that oversees where we get our water and how the water is distributed. Like, that's a good start. It's actual practical stuff that affects our lives in our neighborhoods here in Santa Clarita. Another friend of mine is running for city council, and she's great. She's such, she ran, I guess technically she was on the ballot in 2020, but she didn't have a long runway, so she lost. But she's been basically campaigning for the last 2 years, learning about all the different neighborhoods all over the valley, and really, learning about how to run a campaign, how to run an election. And I think she's great. I think she's gotten a great education on it. And I told her, listen, if Christie loses and we get Garcia again, I want you to run for the U.S. House District. But she has this 2 years of training of how to run an aggressive campaign in it's a large portion of the U.S. House District. It doesn't cover the whole thing, but her just going to barbecues and doing fundraisers, and she's learning how to do it. And then she'll learn the functioning of government, what it's like to sit on a city council and what her job actually is. Because running a campaign is very different than actually sitting on a city council and doing your job on the city council. So I think it's great. She's going to, if she wins, which I think she will, she's going to get a great education.
Now, is
So
she a third party person, or what's her stance?
it'll be interesting to see
Very
if she does have to declare, because at the city council level, you have to stay undeclared. I think I forget what the designation is, but they don't have Democrats and Republicans for our city council.
Okay.
We basically know who they are. Like Bill, my friend Bill, who's been on for the last 4 or 5 years, and he was mayor for one of the terms. I know he's a Republican, lifelong Republican, conservative guy, Bill Miranda. So we all know what they are, but technically for the city council, you have to remain undeclared, independent.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Jim says he's originally from Bakersfield, lived in Humboldt for 15 years before coming to New York. And this is interesting. He's aware of Corey's politics.
Oh, how do you know my politics?
We'll find out. So Jim was very active. He's with one of my favorite political activist groups that needs all kinds of attention, should get all kinds of support. The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Okay. Humboldt. So he's up in Humboldt. My oldest kid lives in Humboldt now. So I just watched a movie about it. Actually, kind of scared me because it's like I didn't realize how big the pot industry was up there.
He said it's just the areas. He just knows you from the areas, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And he's in New York. He's in New York, but he's got me going out to interview some candidates this week. Yep, but
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And that's the other side to it. Good, smart it goes back to one of my favorite sayings. A person is smart, people are stupid.
Interesting. Yeah, you get a committee together to design a horse, you'll end up with a camel.
Exactly. You and I can sit here and have this conversation. I promise you we have different viewpoints. Jim and I have had plenty of have talked before. I promise you there's things we have to. One of my other close friends, Tom, he's the only reason that I believe in universal health care.
Okay.
Is sitting down and talking to this guy, and he explained some things to me. And I went, you know what? You're absolutely right. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
But you know what you'll never get me to buy in on is college education for everyone. Go pound sand. You know why I don't believe in it? Because let me go show you what my school taxes look like after 12 years at spending $140,000 on my kid. And you're telling me that when they walk out of school, they don't have a good enough education. But I have an aunt who retired as a bank vice president with a high school diploma.
Yeah. There's a lot of people I know that they have other ways of getting there. Like my education, I didn't get a college degree, but I learned finance from studying for my Series 7, Series 63. I was a stockbroker in my early 20s. And then, I knew I didn't want to be a stockbroker for the rest of my life. So I was a broker during the day. And at night, I went to this theater conservatory and we were studying Shakespeare and Tennessee Williams and Odette. So I learned English and I learned an appreciation for literature from doing it, So my education was a little bit non-traditional, but I feel like I got a really good one, even though I don't have the degree to show for it,
Isn't that amazing? So that's why, like, when people talk about college education, everyone should have one. No, you shouldn't. No, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
No.
So I gotta respond to the politics thing. So what's interesting is that when I'm hanging out with guys that are like I got one buddy who's a big Ben Shapiro fan, and he is absolutely convinced that I'm left liberal activist. But it's like, that's because, dude, you're in a bubble. Like, you're in an information bubble, And then I got other friends who are pretty left, and they're like, Corey, I didn't know how conservative you are. So I don't know. Like we sometimes that my kids were going to this Christian school. They a bunch of people there, hardcore Republicans. They were all convinced I was a quote unquote dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. I'm like, I've been an independent since I started voting. No, I never heard of
what is, you have to tell us what that is there, Jim. Neither one of us have heard of Epic. Let's see if I had Nathan around. Nathan would Google this for me, and I'd already have an answer. So I'll have to look that one up. But it's interesting when people start to hear what your viewpoints are, and they start going, "Well, you must be one of these."
Yeah.
No, not me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's so many of us that are like, we all have different views. I think there's a lot more of us. The hardcore Republicans and hardcore Democrats, especially today's version of those parties, is a shrinking element. I think there's a plurality of us that are independent with a lowercase I, like whether you register as independent or not, because I might feel one way on, say, like abortion legislation that's being put forth. I might feel a different way about immigration legislation. Like, tell me the actual policy itself, and then I'll have an opinion about it. Like I was against. I'll just give you an example. This is how Christy Smith and I got to know each other. I was against the $15 minimum wage thing here in LA. LA County, what came before California as a state. I wasn't against it because like I want to hold the workers down. Listen, I'm a small business owner, and I take all the pride is about creating opportunities for people. So my objection to it was that the people who were passing the legislation didn't understand the actual math. The math didn't work. They were asking us to raise minimum wage for everybody, including our interns, by 50% over a 5-year period. And I said, listen, the way that we come up with our prices that we charge our customers is there's a specific calculation. It's based on the wages that we pay our guys. I can't raise my rates by 50% in 5 years. How am I going to make that math work? So one of the reasons Christy and I still, she's the Democrat running here in California 27. So we still disagree about 75% of the time, if not more, on specific policy issues. But when she was in the assembly, she heard me and she said, I understand I still disagree with you about $15 minimum wage, but let's find something in the math to make it a little bit more digestible. And she found something. In my case, it was workers' comp. So she came to understand that there were all these other expenses that were tied directly to our wages, like workers' comp. So she said, let's give small business owners some relief on the workers' comp so that they can make the minimum wage thing work. So we still had a lot of disagreements, but just the fact that she's looking creatively for some things in the state legislation to help small business owners out, that meant a lot. Like we were having the conversation. We could still talk across our differences and maybe come up with creative solutions. That's what collaboration is all about. That's what compromise is all about.
So you would bring that up. I just recently had this conversation with somebody in my industry trying to explain to them what we do, how it works. And they were like, well, why do you keep saying 27 cents? And I had to explain to them that in New York State, for every dollar that your employer pays you, New York State asks for another 27 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what? Yeah. I'm like, yes, New York State extortion fee is on average 27 cents. So when you ask your employer to, hey, I need a $5 an hour raise, well, think about that. You're giving New York State
$1.30 on top of it.
Exactly. You're giving New York State more money. So New York State wants your wages to go up. They love to see your wages going up. That's a great thing for them because they're stealing money from that business so that you get more money, but so do they.
Now I hear the libertarian in you coming out.
Oh God, it's so true. Look, I'm a flat tax guy. I'm such a flat tax guy. I know that like some people are like, oh, it doesn't work. I don't like the idea that I pay a third of my paycheck into taxes and then my county asks for another 8% of my taxes. Like I can do the math on that. Means I'm paying 41% in taxes right off the rip. And that means every dollar I make, I'm actually only making 59 cents on. And when you do that simple math, it's like, no.
So you want to hear something that'll make you sick, and you'll never want to go into one of our companies. I'm so proud of this company. It's a residential and commercial services company. So they do all kinds of stuff, cleaning windows, pressure washing. And I invested in them in 2010. And I'm so proud of how far they've come. And I love my team. Got the best GM in the world, the best office manager in the world. And, the crew is just fantastic. But I was talking about workers' comp. Workers' comp, every dollar that I pay to the guys, 42 cents above and beyond that goes to some insurance entity that it just goes out the window. It's not going to the guys. It's got 42 cents for every dollar I pay to the guys. It's crazy, right?
And it's because of, I look at workman's comp numbers all day long to price to customers. And you start looking at them and it's mind boggling. It's like here in New York, it's like 1.2% for an office worker. But if somebody gets on a ladder.
Yeah. That's when it goes. What is it in New York? California, it's crazy.
So New York, it's actually somewhere in the 20%.
Okay.
Mark.
That sounds about right. I think the lowest states are like I don't think there's any state that's in the single digits, but
Yes.
I've heard as low as 12%.
We have scaffolding law, though.
Oh, okay.
The scaffolding law in New York, if you go around New York City, is where it comes from. You'll see all the buildings have scaffolding. Like there's always scaffolding. And what scaffolding law basically says is not only can you sue the construction company from a workman's comp standpoint if you get hurt, you can also go after the building. Because
that's interesting.
So that goes up. But I wanted to get back to James here real quick. So he said Epic is one of the more radical environmental groups from the 90s and 2000s in Northern California. They're now known as a website called wildcalifornia.org is what it became. And he also says that he appreciates compromise and collaborations as a political method, and he applauds you, Corey.
Oh, that's nice. I appreciate that. Yeah, and listen, like when your candidate doesn't win, you're not supposed to get everything you want, But if they can still include you in the conversation, that's what I appreciated. Like I knew that she won. She's a Democrat. She's going to push for her policies. But the fact that she had me on her small business committee, the fact that she worked my language, my actual language into the policies that she was advocating for, that meant that she was, even though we still disagreed 3/4 to 90% of the time, she was actually representing me in that. I was her constituent. I wasn't just the enemy, the adversary. I was her constituent. So I appreciated that, and I just appreciated the process. And even though we still disagree a lot of the times, I still respect how she arrives at her conclusions, how she arrives at legislation that she was supporting at the time. And hopefully if she's elected, like she'll be the same way, knowing that she has a lot of people who strongly disagree with a lot of her baseline policies. But that's why I was frustrated with Mike. The funny thing is I'm actually going to this dinner tonight. A couple of my best friends are like his biggest fundraisers. They have like these big fundraising activities for him. And I've been wanting to get Mike on the program, but he won't come on. Like I'll give him a fair hearing, and because he's still my representative, as much as I disagree with where he was in terms of the election and his voting record and stuff, he's still our representative. I wanted to get him on and just give him a fair hearing,
Kristen, if you can't get him, if Corey can't get him, send him over here. I know he's my
then you can talk shit about me. Like Michael, come on, this fucking CoreyNathan. God, he's the bane of my existence.
Tell me all about him. Tell me all about him. Come on. Come on. I want to hear what you got to say. And then he'll sit there and be like, so my answer to him would always be,
man shouldn't butt into anything that ain't his own affair.
I thought you were going to go, what we have here is a failure to communicate.
I have like this great other one, but I won't go I have some good ones on here. But I love it. So Kristen says, thank you, Corey, for all you do. Thank you for being a politically positive person, or a person who is positive, who is involved in politics. I can't wait to listen to your show. And Jim also, this is the point of the third party politics, to guide the conversation. It's true. That's the idea here with third party, and that's why I get into this with so many folks. And look, make sure you're getting over there and checking out www.politicsandreligion.us. See what Corey's got going on. Checking out Corey's show, Talking Politics and Religion. If you're looking and you're like, which one is it? It has a purple background. You'll see that. It's very easy to pick up what show is his. Make sure you go in and check it in, and you're following his show and subscribing to what he's got. And if you're finding me through him, subscribe over here. That's the way we guide these conversations also. And that's my worst thing about being a third party voter is my candidates too many times, as I said before, think that, well, I should just get the biggest stage right now. I should just give me the biggest stage right now. That's what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
Step into that smaller space. It's amazing what it'll do for you.
And listen, at the end of the day, it's about getting along with people. Nobody's going to be our clone. Even people that I largely agree with, we still find disagreements. But that's how you learn. That's how you learn new things and come to a better understanding. So I'll tell you something real quick, and I'm sure you got to wrap it up here pretty soon. But so I have 3 kids. One of my kids is, I wouldn't call him hardcore MAGA, but he's definitely at least adjacent to that world. And I understand why. He works with his hands. He's a brilliant kid. He's a welder, and he learned TIG welding, and so he's hanging around with a lot of guys who are pretty hardcore, red hat wearing guys. So when it came down to the vaccines, he wasn't anti-vax at first. He was just like, I don't know about it. I just want to wait and see. I want to see if it gets passed by the FDA. And but just even saying that, people in the family, friends just started beating him up, like just pounding on him. And I was one of them. And then I circled back around with him once it did get past the FDA, and he didn't want to talk to me about it because he was like, I don't want to talk about it. You guys beat me up, and I'm done. So I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I didn't approach it the right way because, listen, I believed in the efficacy of the vaccines, and I really appreciate it. I got vaccinated. But I learned from my son a few of the things, like what his concerns were and kind of what he was pushing back against. For him, and you might say that this wasn't the most mature way of going about it, but for him, his decision was made once people started dogpiling on him as a rabbit, So I got it. I understood why he had an aversion to the idea of it. And I had to earn the right to have a conversation with him about it. So then fast forward a couple months, last year during New Year's, I was meeting with my 3 best friends that I grew up with. And it was the first time in our whole lives that our entire families were going to be able to be together. And we wanted Jackie Boy to be a part of it. So there's 19 people in total. Jackie Boy was the only one who wasn't vaccinated. So I just continued to have the conversation. Jack, we love you. This wouldn't be right if you weren't there. We want you with us. You're a family, And so I talked to the fellas, and I said, Jack's just not going to get vaccinated. And they were like, they understood. I explained it. And they said, well, will he get tested the day before he comes out? Because even that was objectionable to him. Because at that point, he was just like, I hate all these people. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And Jack, to his credit, he was like, yeah, I think that's a good compromise. So me as his dad, and I do believe in the efficacy of vaccines, I wish he got the vaccine. But you know what? He got tested the day before he came out. That way, everybody, felt safe. And I thought that was a good compromise. But that's how that works in real life. It's like, with my son, I'm not going to persuade him to take an 180-degree turn. And frankly, the way that we tried to go about it did more harm than good. But if you get in a conversation, you emphasize the relationship over like winning the point or winning the debate. It's not about that. You stay in the relationship, and maybe like he persuaded me. I understood his position better after having these conversations with him, and he understood me a little bit more, and to the point where he wouldn't even get a test, but at least he got the test to make everybody feel safe and included and part of the family. So I think it looks more like that, where there's like, instead of a 180-degree turn, there's a 1-degree turn, there's a 5-degree turn. And part of that ability to persuade is the willingness to be persuaded. So that's at the heart of what this looks like. It's about being able to get together, Thanksgiving or otherwise, without wanting to throw the freaking mashed potatoes at my face.
We've all got to get to that point, and I love it, and I think you're right there. It reminds me of my least, something said by my least favorite president, which is Reagan, and that is, we need an 80% solution. If we can get to 80%. We can figure the other 20% out. And I didn't like that guy at all.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh God, no. I worked in the unions.
Oh, okay.
That dude was a scumbag to unions.
That was one of the first things he did. He broke up the traffic controllers union, right?
Well, what he did to the ATC when they went on strike, he basically made it illegal for any entity that is considered any entity that's considered as a national like need. So railroaders got grouped into that. So railroaders, if you know what's going on with the political scene right now, railroaders can't go on strike unless Congress approves it.
Oh, wait, that's kind of backwards.
Right. So they have to, if they want to go on strike, that's why it's making such national news when you hear it. It's because them going on strike has to be approved by Congress. Post office also falls underneath that. Can't go on strike without congressional approval. So if they do go on strike, they are going 100% counter to this law that says you're not allowed to do that. So
It's interesting. So I have maybe a nuanced view on union fights in general, because there have been a few that I've been most familiar with. My main business is in an entertainment industry. So I've been very familiar with the SAG strike of 2001, the writer's strike around, I think that was 2008 or so. And the funny thing is that I've disagreed with the issues that they were striking for, but I believed in the principle of collective bargaining,
absolutely.
the leverage that you can only have by being able to collectively bargain. So even though I disagreed with a lot, the actual issues themselves, as well as like they didn't assess their own leverage, even if they were collectively bargaining. But I believed in their right to do so, even if they were wrong about it, So
And we got
I thought they ended up doing more harm than good to themselves in both instances. But again, like I believe in a union's right to exist, and for workers to have voices, to be able to have some leverage in the room with management. But at the same time, I also believe in individuals' rights to not have to be a part of that union.
See, that's something I could get into all day long. And confused over Instagram. I apologize. I'm trying to figure out confused. Damn, I don't know what that.
Confused amnesiac.
There you go. That's a tough word for me. I don't have a way for you to call in, but you're welcome to type out a question and we'll answer it, because we're getting ready to wrap this up here in a moment. But if you have a question, please type it up and I'll be happy to ask it here. But I get into the whole union piece, and when people are like, well, I don't want to be a part of your union, but I want to work there. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And this is so my buddy Tom, this is his Facebook profile. According to the Young Turks,
yeah.
Biden plan was rejected by the union today. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's one of the three big unions today came out and said, no, we're not voting that plan. So that there's a big chance that this strike will come about. And that's why I say, if they strike, this is where does the political lines and the legal lines of this come in, to where Reagan and his scumbag buddies really cause problems here that are finally being addressed. And if you really want to, here, I'll give you one. You're out in California. Do you really want to piss off a Republican? You really want to piss one off and they all talk bad about the California gun laws? You really want to upset them? Remind them that the reason that California gun laws suck is because of Reagan.
Yeah. No, it was. I do remember having this conversation, because the buddy I was referring to, a buddy earlier who is a big Ben Shapiro fan, and dude has a big old gun rack as soon as you walk into his garage, and Trump stickers all over it. And he was telling me the history of how a lot of these laws were getting passed. It actually, one of the early ones under Reagan, it was one of the more explicitly racial driven issues. I forgot exactly what it was. I'll have to go back and study it.
So that was the Black Panthers.
Oh, right.
Black Panthers used to walk kids through some of these horrible neighborhoods in Los Angeles. They would walk them. There'd be one at the front, one at the back. California was an open carry state, so they would carry their rifles and shotguns and walk the kids to school, and then walk them back. And people, oh, this is so scary. I just can't handle this. Oh, it's so scary. So they complained about it. And what did he do? Pulled the race card on it and didn't want to admit that that's what it was. So he made open carry illegal. Also, they did a great job in California of demonizing the Black Panthers, who, hey, if you get guys like before school and after school lunch programs for kids, that's the Black Panthers. That's who created those programs. But again, race law, government that we had at the time, who loved to kind of attack this stuff and be like, oh, we can't have this. These are horrible people. No, it's just they weren't happy with you. So, but we're going to get ready to put a bow on this. Corey, I know you got dinner tonight. You didn't even invite me, which is bogus. I don't know how that happened. My invitation must have got lost. I'm going to get you hooked up with Kristen. You better.
That'd be fun. That'd be really great. In all sincerity, I've been watching the comments come through, and if we're in the area, listen, first round of drinks is on me. Maybe even the second round of drinks.
Yeah, she's
Kristen.
I don't remember what area of California she's in. It's not coming to me right now. I don't know why I'm thinking San Bernardino is sticking in my head up that way. And
Okay, that's not too far from me.
She's gotten some great folks on my show, so we're going to do that. And again, Sunday or Monday, you can catch the Talking Politics and Religion podcast. So make sure you go and you subscribe to that. Make sure you take a look at www.politicsandreligion.us. And if you're looking for an opportunity to just individually reach out and talk to Corey, his Twitter is at Corey S. That's S as in Sierra. Nathan. So make sure you reach him out. He said Twitter is probably the best spot to get him. If you like what you're listening to here and you find us through Corey, if you're one of our regular viewers and you haven't subscribed to everything, remember it's all the Above the Bar podcast at Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, even the email is the Above the Bar podcast at gmail.com. So make sure you give us a likes and follows. And as I always tell you, if you really enjoy this, make sure you go to your neighbor's house and you knock on their door. When they answer the door, if they have their phone in their hand, just take their phone out of their hand, start shuffling through their phone, and make sure that they're subscribed. They will appreciate you for doing it. If you're traveling on public transportation, do the same thing. And when they go, what are you doing? Make sure you tell them, hey, I'm subscribing you to the Above the Bar podcast. You need this in your life. These are important things for folks to do. I will appreciate it when it gets on the news as to why you did it. And then that will increase our membership. I might even start a GoFundMe for you to get out of jail.
That's awesome. Take somebody's phone, from the subway, type in, Above the Bar pod, and you just say, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's all you do. You just hand it right back to them. And they're like, what did you just do? Be like, you're welcome. And when they're like, and then they'll listen to all these episodes and they'll be like, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Trust me. I know it's going to happen that way. People love that. So as we do on every show, any live appearances, anything for you coming up there, Corey? Anything we got happening soon?
No, listen, in the 2023, we're going to start looking at that. I produce a couple other shows. We're definitely going to start doing some live appearances, but there's one live appearance that I'm really crossing my fingers that actually happens. And that's the live appearance with an audience of one. And that's with Kristen when we get drinks together here in SoCal.
I think it'll happen. Look, you careful what you ask for. I love her. She is so connected and will make things happen. She's going to inundate you with all kinds of stuff. She's going to be like, what about this one? Have you talked to this one? Let me introduce this person to you. She's got them all.
Oh, that's awesome.
She's got them all. Don't log off afterwards. You and I got to talk for a moment, as we always say here. We got to get into something real quick. But as we do on every single episode, the guest gets the final word. So what is the final word from you there, Corey?
That's a great question. You kind of put me on the spot. And I would say, just remember these two words. Help me understand. No, I'm just kidding. That was a thing. Like everybody did the two words and they gave three. No, just remember, help me understand. Because I think that's a great way to enter into a more productive conversation. If you genuinely come into it, not trying to win a debate or win some points, because you're really not winning anything. But if you enter into it and you emphasize the relational over the transactional, and you genuinely have a posture of help me understand. I didn't think of it that way. Oh, that's interesting. Help me understand.
Alrighty, folks, be sure to push your stool in.
This has been an Earplug Podcast presentation. Found on earplugpodcast.com, iTunes, SoundCloud, and wherever your favorite podcasts are found.